In April 1997, I was 16 years old, a sophomore in high school, and had just gotten my first little used car. I worked two jobs to pay the payments and insurance. My parents' 20 years of marriage was falling apart, leaving my brother and me to our own devices. We lived in a small town, so unfortunately we drank and smoked weed to deal with the depression from our family breaking up. Jamie and I were only 16 months apart, so we hung out in the same group of friends and were always together. I'd started seeing this guy who was 6 years older than me, 22 at the time, and he was bad news from the start. He hadn't graduated school, didn't have a job or car, and spent his days looking for girls to drive him around and playing basketball. My dad had moved out, and my mom had become more relaxed with the rules. She sometimes let B spend the night as long as he slept on the couch. One night during the school week, she told me that he couldn't stay over and asked me to drive him home. He lived about 50 minutes away. I didn't want him to go, but I knew my mom went business. We left around 10 p.m. To explain this a little better, I'll describe the road we had to take. We lived in a small town in West Virginia, sandwiched between two slightly bigger cities. The only road connecting them was Route 60, a narrow two-lane highway with lots of blind curves and hills. It was the main thoroughfare for all traffic, including tractor trailers hauling food, coal, and wood. Locals were used to it, but outsiders often got nauseated by the winding road. That night was clear, and there wasn't much traffic. I was going about 45 in a 55 zone as I rounded a sharp curve. I was suddenly blinded by another car's bright lights, and boom! I saw two legs fly up in front of me. I immediately pulled over, thinking I had hit a deer. What did we hit? I kept asking B, panicking. We both jumped out and looked back towards the road. A woman was lying in the middle of it. A small girl, maybe 20 feet away, was also on the ground. Neither of them was moving. I went into autopilot. I ran to the nearest house, which happened to be one of my best friends. I screamed for them to call 911. I told them I'd hit two people. I was crying and shaking uncontrollably. I called my mom, and she said she was on her way. My friend and I ran back to the road, where B had managed to stop traffic. I remember walking over to the little girl. She had blonde hair and a beaded necklace that said Hannah. Her eyes were rolled back in her head. I knew she had head trauma. While we waited for the paramedics, I took stock of the scene. Across the road sat a pickup truck with a camper top, parked in the middle of the lane. One headlight was out, the other one was on high beam. That's why I couldn't see anything. The driver's door was wide open and the CD was playing on repeat, blasting Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. I finally screamed for somebody to turn it off. After what felt like forever, the emergency crews arrived, and the woman and little girl were airlifted to trauma hospital. The next day, we were updated. The woman had broken ribs, broken legs, and internal injuries, but the little girl, Hannah, had died from head trauma. I was devastated. The case was presented to the prosecuting attorney to determine whether I would be charged with vehicular homicide or manslaughter. I was just a teenager. My car was returned to me, and I saw strands of blonde hair in the right headlight. I had horrible nightmares of those legs flying up in front of me. I clenched my jaw so hard in my sleep that it shifted my upper teeth. I was placed in counseling with an excellent psychiatrist. Meanwhile, the state brought in investigators who measured the markings on the road where my car was, where the bodies landed, everything. Eventually, all the evidence was submitted to the judge and prosecutor. It had been ruled a total freak accident that couldn't have been avoided. I wasn't charged. And while that was a huge relief, I still felt an overwhelming guilt. I couldn't drive at night for over 10 months. But it wasn't over. The woman's insurance company sued mine, and we had to give up depositions in court. We found out a lot. The woman, Jody, wasn't even supposed to have custody of her daughter. The father had custody, but Jody had been taking Hannah from his house and been riding around with her in the truck for her 3 days. She'd been in mental health facilities throughout her life. The reasons she gave for being in the middle of the road: there was a dead possum, and since her daughter was an animal lover, they had stopped to move it. A precious little girl lost her life over a possum. My insurance company didn't award Jody any money due to her negligence, but they did award $50,000 for Hannah. This tragedy changed my entire life. I'm 41 years old now and still can't drive at night. I just think the story might be interesting to some people. It's strange, dark, very tragic. For a while now, ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated with Point Pleasant, West Virginia. My dad used to tell me stories about the Mothman and how it terrorized a small town back in the 60s. It was because of his stories that I started doing research on other cryptids and urban legends like skinwalkers, wendigos, and the Jersey Devil, and many others. Point Pleasant was the closest town to me, so I made it a goal to drive down there for a weekend on the 53rd anniversary of the first Mothman sighting on Friday, November 15th. I picked up my stepbrother and stepsister, and we both headed down to West Virginia. They were both skeptics that didn't care about the legend, honestly. I don't know why they even wanted to go in the first place. We made it to the small town around 3 p.m. and checked into a low-budget hotel. A couple of hours after visiting a Mothman museum and checking out other small shops, my two friends, Katie and Joanna, arrived for the weekend trip as well. We all met in the Mothman restaurant where some locals could tell we were out of town and enjoyed chatting with us about their town. One of them asked, "You folks go check out the TNT area yet?" I responded, "No, not yet, but it's on our go-to list." That's when our group thought it would be a great idea to go there at night and visit the area where the Mothman was sighted by two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet. We brought flashlights and headlamps and headed to the area around 8:45 p.m. We approached a gate that was blocked off to prevent vehicles from entering, so we decided to get out of the car and walk into the wooded area. It was really dark out, and all we had to guide our way was our lights and my GPS, which led us towards one of the bunkers. We reached an opening in the forest where I believe a factory building once stood before being demolished. It was at this point that my stepsister and Joanna saw a pair of eyes staring at us from the woods. Whatever it was turned around and walked back into the forest. They assumed it was a large animal, and for safety's sake, we decided to head back to the car. As we passed the gate, I noticed it could be lifted with two people, so we decided to open it and drive in with my car. A little further down, we found a bunker to our right, parked, and went inside to get some pictures. One of our friends was starting to get really uncomfortable, so I told her we could be back during daylight, when we would be more aware of our surroundings. I got back into the car and I pulled onto the road. Before we could take off, Katie and I told the group we were going to close the fence, since it was closed for a reason. We got out of the car, which was facing away from the fence, and the only light behind us was my brake lights. As we slowly moved the fence back into place, I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the bunker we just visited. They easily stood 6 or 7 feet off the ground. I was just standing there, staring. I froze. I said, "Katie, did you see that?" She responded, "What?" Then she looked up and saw the eyes too. The moment we both locked eyes with it, they turned red and the thing began running towards us. I yelled, "Katie, run!" And she screamed and ran for the car. The creature pursuing us let out this horrifying roar, nothing I've ever heard in my life before or since. Katie tripped and fell hard, and I didn't move until I knew she was safely in the car. Once she was inside, I ran. The eyes were only about 15 feet away from me at that point. I jumped into the car and floored it. The road out of the TNT area has a speed limit of 35. I was easily doing 100. We were badly shaken, but honestly, it felt like history was repeating itself, just like it had 53 years ago. Once we got back to the hotel, we tried to gather our thoughts. I wanted to think logically about what we saw. We looked up wildlife native to the area and tried to compare the noise to anything we could find. Nothing matched. I'm not saying it was the Mothman or Sheep Squatch or Wendigo, but something about the way it stood and started coming towards us made me think otherwise. Our group has decided to invest in tech to record our future cryptid hunts. We plan to return to Point Pleasant soon and try to capture what we saw on camera. Cryptid hunting is no joke. What we felt that night was genuine fear, and we could have died. Yes, it may have been a bear, it may have been a mountain lion, but you never truly know what's out there, waiting in the dark for his next meal. You.